Um, Hopefully everyone is staying warm. We really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us this evening with the weather that's just been so crazy. We know we have a number of DSN clients and non-DSN clients on this call, so we'll be doing our best to make sure that this session is relevant and informational and valuable to everyone. Um, Shouldn't take too long. We expect the session to be roughly 15 minutes, and then we have a short video, and then we will open it to Q&A. Few other just housekeeping items, excuse me. Any questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will answer them. We'll also, as I said, have some time at the end for questions. We will record the session, so if you have to leave early, no worries. We will send that out most likely tomorrow morning. So with all that being said, today we're going to be talking about the top 5 imaging challenges that OMS practices face, and of course, how you solve them. Speaking today primarily will be Michelle, um, who, yes,
Hi, Roddy.
Michelle. Hey, Michelle.
Hi.
Helps lead inside sales. I am Isaac. I help lead marketing. And then we also have V on the call, who's a director of implementations. And he is also our in-house imaging expert. So any sort of technical questions, V should be able to help with. So with all that being said, I will pass it to Michelle and let her take over.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Isaac, and thank you to all who are joining. Before we get started with the agenda, just want to acknowledge, like Isaac said, many areas across the country are dealing with some real severe weather right now. So appreciate your taking the time to join us, and I do hope that you and your teams are staying safe. Today's webinar is not about treatment planning techniques or implant software comparisons or replacing tools that you already rely upon. Instead, we're going to focus on imaging workflows and how imaging is accessed, how it's used day to day, and where headaches tend to show up in real practices. Many of the challenges we're going to talk about are patterns we see across practices of all sizes, largely because imaging systems were not originally designed to work the way that practices operate today. So the goal of today is really education, just looking at what commonly gets in the way, what tends to work better, and how DSN imaging can support patient care without adding complexity. So why does this matter? The term. This matters because um, oh, yeah. Why does this matter? Yes, most practices don't think, hey, our imaging is broken. Instead, they feel small slowdowns and workarounds that become normal. And over time, those add up to lost time, frustration, costs. Imaging isn't just a clinical tool, it affects the entire practice. Um, and so, you know, one second here. Sorry, you guys. That So we're just going to talk about some of those challenges, that they show up. They typically don't announce themselves, like, hey, we're having a problem. Of course, sometimes you'll see that when images don't load or there's error messages. But typically it shows up in smaller ways where we change our workflow. And the reality in most practices is one of the overlooked aspects of imaging is how many people it actually touches throughout the patient journey. It's not used just by one role in isolation. It shows up across the entire practice, often in different ways, depending on the moment. Your surgeons use imaging for diagnosing, planning, assistants for setup and prep, admins for referrals or records, and patients to understand what's being discussed. That same scan can be opened multiple times across a single case during consults, follow-ups, preps, and sometimes months later. And it's because of this that reliability and ease of access matter just as much as clinical capability. And when your imaging can support all of those roles in the practice smoothly, it can fade in the background. And when it doesn't support those roles, everyone feels it. Challenge number one. Most practices feel it first during consultations. The photos that you see on the slide, that's real. You're ready to have a conversation. You're waiting for the image to load, logging into another system, asking somebody else to pull it up. Maybe one doctor was able to look at it if you're collaborating with your providers, and then the other doctor's like, hey, can you pull that image up for me? And you're going to spend a lot of time searching different places, folders, computers, softwares, just to find that right study. This is not a training issue, it's an access issue. And as you guys know, when images are disconnected from the rest of the chart, you really lose context. You're not seeing that image alongside the diagnosis, the referral note, the treatment discussion. It becomes a standalone artifact rather than part of the clinical story. More on challenge number one, that images live outside the patient's chart. Often in practices, imaging exists in a completely different, separate ecosystem from the rest of the patient's chart. Not because anybody chose it intentionally, it's really because imaging platforms, they were never designed originally to function as part of the integrated chart. That means it's something you go to rather than something that lives naturally in the patient's record. And when imaging isn't embedded in the patient's chart, it creates constant platform switching. During consults and preps and follow-ups, you have to stop what you're doing to hunt down that image. And over time, this breaks focus. In many practices, access is also tied to a specific machine or specific users. What this looks like in our day-to-day is just that program hopping, opening one application for notes, another for images, sometimes on different computers altogether. And that friction may be small in that moment, but it is cumulative and it definitely adds up during consults and treatment planning. Challenge number two, your slow load times and clunky imaging viewers. Your CBCT images take too long to load. In many offices, this load time for your image depends on where the data is stored. Local servers, aging hardware, remote desktop connections. That means delays can start even before you've reviewing the scan. And, you know, if images take too long to load, you've got laggy navigation through the zoom, the rotate, the tools. We sort of stop using those tools that are lagging. And one of the reasons lag shows up when systems are optimized for really deep surgical planning tasks, not a quick review. When all you really need to do is orient the anatomy, reference a scan, that whole scan loading time can feel heavy and slow. More on challenge number two, the slow load times. Um, the fast tools get used, slow tools get avoided, and imaging becomes less helpful over time. Usability directly impacts patient care planning and your efficiency during patient care. When tools open quickly and behave predictably, teams naturally incorporate them in the everyday workflows, consults, hygiene checks, follow-ups. When your tools are slow or awkward to access, our teams adapt. They stop pulling images unless they absolutely have to. Not because that imaging isn't valuable, but the friction isn't worth it in the moment. We say we'll pull it up later. I'll stay at lunch. I'll pull that image up at the end of the day. Often team members, as you guys know, say, well, I don't touch imaging. Only so and so touches imaging because I don't have time for that image to load. Um, so it does matter. Those slow load times, for sure, do make a big difference. Challenge number three, security and access risks are overlooked. Um, the results of a workaround that we develop because older systems weren't designed of how practices operate, it just increases security in your imaging. Most practices still rely on local servers or workstation-based storage for imaging, and that can work, right? But it also means access, backups, and security that are tied to physical hardware in the office. Local storage, it's limited and kind of fragile. And it can create challenges when your practice grows, you add locations, or you bring on new providers. Imaging data is large and it's sensitive. And when access is limited, or systems aren't secure, teams create workarounds. Uh, Shared logins, exporting files. They definitely solve the problem in the moment when you're in the fire with your patient. But it does increase your risks and security compliance risks. Remote access depends on VPNs, remote desktops, specific machines being left on overnight or all weekend long. And that just creates inconsistency, where some users can access images easily and others cannot. And so when access isn't reliable, teams start looking for alternatives. Challenge number 4, imaging systems don't scale as the practice grows. These challenges usually don't appear all at once. They show up gradually as practices grow. You add people, you add another operatory, you add a computer in the hallway, or locations. And what works for a single provider often breaks down as the practice grows. Per user, per workstation licensing models make access expensive and restrictive. Teams are forced to choose between paying more or limiting who can view images, and that creates a lot of friction operationally and financially. So when access doesn't scale smoothly, imaging can unintentionally become a bottleneck. Instead of supporting care, it slows it down. More on this challenge number 4. Imaging systems don't scale as a practice grows. When you practice grows, it exposes your cracks. And by cracks, we're really talking about the pressure points that show up once your complexity and volume increases. As your team grows, these questions come up. Who needs access? From which rooms? Which locations? Which computers? Do I have to be physically in the office for access? So centralized imaging removes location-based barriers without duplicating your data. Traditional imaging often ties licenses to machines or individual users. And again, as teams grow, it become expensive and restrictive. And imaging challenges, they're rarely about the clinical ability. It's all about the access and consistency and scaling. Challenge number 5. Yes, challenge number 5. So, storing and sharing images, we've all been there, right? We need to share a CT scan. We're burning it to a flash drive. We're burning it to a disk. We are potentially driving it over to the referring doctor's office. We're setting it out for the patient. And offices call us saying they can't open the CT scan. We might spend 5 or 10, 15 minutes talking them through how to open that scan, and maybe they're successful. That's been my experience as a hygienist. I believe it's probably a common experience. Uh, Sometimes we will take snippet and screenshots of the CT scan of the important areas or the areas that we're treating or the pathology. And we share those. It takes time. We put them in the patient file. We're emailing that to the doctor. But those snipping tools, we lose sight of the full scan, and the full imaging loses its impact when we do that because sharing is hard and it's complicated. DSN imaging, we are active in development in creating the capability to share a full CT scan with an encrypted email, a URL link with an encrypted password, and you can easily share that full CT scan with a referring doctor, with a collaborating doctor, and even with the patient if they request their records. It's going to be fantastic. We're all looking forward to that. That's very soon to be released. You're going to see a little bit of how that works here in a very brief demo that we're gonna show you. So, what high performing practices do differently, they don't treat imaging as something that lives on one computer in the office. Images are available and need to be available where conversations, planning, and decisions actually occur, whether that's chairside, in a consult room, remotely, administratively, that you need access. The admin team's trying to get that Panorex that's been extracted so they can file insurance with that. So when access improves, workflows improve and risk decreases. And that is the access model that DSN imaging is built around. Its foundation is built around this. Imaging should support your clinical decision making and not complicate it. As practices evolve, imaging infrastructure has to evolve with them. So the focus stays on supporting your people, taking care of your patients, not managing the workarounds. So this is just a brief video that V created for us. Thank you so much, V, showing you how you can be right in the patient's chart, access the patient's full study of images, CT scan, and open that. Uh, there's some demonstration of the measuring tools, all the annotations, and then how we're sharing that CT scan. So I'm going to play this video.
Here, we're going to take a look at DSN imaging and primarily launching it from DSN Cloud. First, you will make sure
I do want to stop and just confirm if everybody can hear that well enough. If you can't, please let us know in the chat.
the
So,
desired page.
real quick, sorry, if you could pause it. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them, either, along the video or any other questions that might come up. All right, sorry, Michelle, you can go.
No, thanks. Thank you so much, V. Yes. So basically, from DSN Imaging, DSN Cloud, directly in the patient's chart, you're choosing the patient, clicking on DSN Imaging, choosing the study or studies that the patient has that you want to view.
Once you do so, you will click on the button for the DSN imaging bridge, just like any other imaging integration into DSN Cloud. Once you do so, you will get a pop-up that will show all the images associated with that patient for DSN imaging. Simply select one and launch. This will then give you a new pop-up with the image. You can then maximize this window so you can see the entire featured toolset. With the image pulled up, we will look at a few features we can explore. First, we will perform a dental MPR, which allows you to take a pano of a CT. Now that the image is loaded, I'm just going to simply trace out over here. And then double click to generate the pano. As you can see here, I have a nice panoramic slice of that CT. Another convenient feature that you can take a look at is measuring. To do so, please select the measure icon. From here, you can select your starting point and then the end point to get a perfect idea of what the measurement shall be. Within DSN imaging, you can also manipulate 3D volumes. If you take a look over here, I will select the rotate tool. And with that, I can move around the 3D volume. If you'd like something with a little bit more precision, there are also some orientation options you can select from over here. These will allow you to easily lock in any other orientation that you'd like to look at. Let's take a look at another feature coming soon to DSN imaging, and that will be link sharing. The ability to share with a provider outside of the office, such as a referring doctor. You will simply navigate over to plugins, and this will generate a URL which you can then send to the referring doctor, as well as a password for secure sharing.
So that is the brief demonstration
Here,
of
we're going to take
the video that we've created. Definitely happy to schedule any in-depth demos of DSN imaging. But as you can see, the quick load time for ease and accessibility, that's really what DSN imaging is offering. Just convenience, accessibility, speed, and especially on those when you're just needing to review your image, you're not digging into deep planning at that point. It's so easy to access with that centralized imaging location storage. happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. Would love to.
Yeah, and again, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, see, yep, they're starting to come in. One question around hardware for DSN imaging. What exactly are those requirements?
Yeah, it's primarily a modern web browser, but we like an i3 or better processor and about 8 GB of memory. I can also drop that in the chat if that's easier for everyone to see, but I'm missing where to drop that at.
Yeah, and I think we're good on
Oh, we
that.
have another open question here.
Yeah, there are a few more.
Yeah,
Let's.
we'll definitely do a campaign when the link sharing is available. We're estimating it to go live in about a couple weeks here. The prototype has been very nice and we've liked it so far, and we just want to make sure that there's no issues with it before we move it to the live environment. So we'll most likely notify all our current clients and prospective clients here in a couple weeks regarding the link sharing.
Awesome. Um, Another question. What is the number one metric practices should track to sort of gauge imaging performance over time? Or any metric or two that comes to mind.
I mean, I think storage size is a good one, and that's one that a lot of people are dealing with local storage. Whenever their hard drive balloons out, they're like, "Am I going to spend this amount of money to buy another 4 TB hard drive, etc.?" That's one thing to think about. I think another one is load times. How long are you waiting? How many clicks are you making? That's just a few of the things I can think of. I don't know, Michelle, I know you have some in-office experience. If there's some that you can sort of think
Sure, I
of.
definitely think those load times and, are you able to access the image in the room where it's happening, whether it's a financial conversation, consultation, post-op follow-up, or are you running around to different monitors? How much time do you spend in transit trying to find that image, running from one computer back to the room? And then, of course, that load time. And of course, how many retakes? I'm a hygienist. Like, how many retakes are you having to take? That's a whole different thing than imaging and storage.
Yeah, for sure.
I see another question. Prexion CBCTs. I unfortunately am not familiar with that system, but if they store as DICOM image formats, then DSN Imaging will work with them. But I could do a little bit of research on what they store in. I'll have to look into that a little bit, but I haven't heard of that system. Michelle, are you familiar with Prexion?
I am. I am. I'm familiar with that one.
Okay.
I think we could probably make that
We
work. We'll
most like,
find out.
yeah. If it saves as a DICOM, which predominantly is most of the systems, then we can definitely integrate with them. And then the ability to share with links. This is unfortunately going to be a feature only available for cloud currently, as DSN Imaging is a cloud product we're launching, but then hopefully we're hoping to visit that for the on-prem offices. But right now it'll just be for cloud, unfortunately.
Awesome. And I think that is it.
I was just going to throw on, I'm seeing that Prexion most likely does save in DICOM, so it should be no issue with DSN Imaging. But sorry, Isaac, I'll give it back to you.
no, I
Yeah,
was
Isaac, one thing I do want to just mention as well, that DSN imaging, it's not, the design is not that we replace your software planning. You're going to take that CT scan in your native software, um, and then we load a copy of it to DSN imaging. But, you know, we hope that one day we're going to have all the advanced planning tools that you might want to plan your cases in DSN imaging. But for right now, it's really for access, viewing, sharing. Certainly, you can do all the pathology and annotations, and that. But you may be married to your planning software, or you might be using a company that helps you plan your surgical cases. with you and they use another system entirely. But storage, ease of access, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely an ancillary system at the moment. We're adding new feature sets all the time, and we're gonna see if we can examine doing the implants and everything like that, the guides, at the end of this year.
All right, perfect. I think, yeah, that's the end of this string of questions. As I mentioned, we will send out a follow-up with a recording to this. Again, thank you all for joining. And we hope to be in touch soon.
Yeah, thank you all so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.